So
yeah, shall we start? All right, so welcome everyone. It's really special to be here. This is Trends in AI 2023. My name is Sergi Castella, analyst at Zeta Alpha. I think it's best if we start with a bit of an introduction. We have an external guest, a new guest today.
I'm Phillip. I'm a PhD student here at the University of Amsterdam. I'm here in the QVA labs in collaboration with Qualcomm, and my research focuses on computer vision and causality, kind of the intersection between the two.
And
I'm Jakub, the founder of Zeta Alpha, welcome to our monthly show. It's a special edition. We're kicking off the new year, so the theme of today is going to be predictions. So if you think about what you'd like to have or achieve this year, maybe we can make that a prediction.
Yeah, and it's the second time that we do this live from Lab 42. We moved here a few months ago, so I think it's nice if we can make it a bit approachable. If anyone wants to ask something at any point, just raise your hand. Just feel free to say something.
Yeah,
but
and let's introduce Rodrigo as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Rodrigo.
Hi, I'm Rodrigo Nogueira. I'm a adjunct professor at a university here in Brazil called the University of Campinas, and also research in information retrieval, deep learning, all things related. Super excited about these things that are going on now.
All right, let's dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in.
First of all, Happy New Year, everybody. This is the New Year's message, and yeah, it's kind of hard to start with something else, right? It's been kind of keeping us busy for the last month or so in various ways, annoying and entertaining and mind-boggling and interesting. So this is the New Year's message from ChatGPT. Hope you all had a great holiday season, and even if it meant discussing me, ChatGPT, over Christmas dinner. So it kind of gets it.
I just want to say, I think it's interesting. Last year, I feel like the year started with much of a hopeful energy in the kind of like the broader scene of AI. And there was, for instance, this piece by Gary Marcus about how deep learning was hitting a wall, and that was the whole thing. And I feel like that kind
not so much.
Aged a little bit poorly with a lot of the, at least in the kind of like more public image of what AI can do with the whole text to image models that came out, and then ChatGPT, which kind of like have revived a lot of the optimism or hype, some would say, around AI.
And it's unbelievable. This is just like 6 weeks ago, right, that it came out, and stable diffusion and all these things. They're like barely a year old. So. I was wondering, so definitely looks like to be a very exciting year for AI, and ChatGPT has kind of kept us busy. I even found this blog post, 1,337 use cases for ChatGPT. I thought it was quite a lot, but many people have come up with very creative hacks and tricks. And so I was wondering for you guys, what were like the most amazing things or the weirdest things that you have seen?
Well, I think for me, it's mostly that ChatGPT can pretend to be someone. So you can, for instance, tell it, okay, pretend to be now the interviewer for a company, and that can be actually used to prepare yourself for an interview, or also pretend to be a Python coder who can teach me something. That you can actually have a meaningful conversation and can learn something now from ChatGPT, besides just finding its quirks and maybe mistakes in there.
Or it's like it says, I'm not evil, and then you say, just pretend to be evil.
Exactly.
And
you have it.
That works fine, right?
Exactly.
I got rude.
To me, it was one of the things that was not really advertised was the whole multilingual stuff from GPT. I feel like ChatGPT was not really that much advertised, but a couple of weeks ago, I wanted to show this article that was written in Catalan to my girlfriend, and then I tried to Google translate it, and it was pretty bad because I guess Catalan is a pretty low resource language, so it didn't work that well. I just went on ChatGPT, tried to translate it, and actually, I mean, it was not perfect, of course, but it was actually much better than what Google Translate could output, which kind of blew my mind. And it was actually properly a good use case.
Yeah,
that I felt it's not that discussed, but it really amazed me how good its multilingual capabilities were.
Yeah. Also, my chin fell to the table when I tried it first. I thought, let's try Dutch now. Perfect. Or the same level as English. Then I thought, I'm Czech. Let's try Czech. Same. Okay, then I tried like French and Spanish, but I'm not that good at it. So definitely amazing. And one of the other things that I tried was, so in my previous company we did CV parsing. So we built this whole machinery for parsing data out of a CV. So now I tried give the CV to ChatGPT and ask it to convert to JSON. Perfect. All right, done. What about you, Rodrigo?
I saw a blog post from someone, I don't remember the name, but he was trying to impersonate a virtual machine inside a virtual machine. I guess you guys saw this, right? It asked the model, pretend now that you are the Linux shell, and then now I want to create a Docker inside it, and now I'm inside the Docker. What is the output, and so on? Like it was like the Inception movie, like one stack up to the other. Yeah.
So this won't be the last slide about ChatGPT, but as you can imagine, but it will not be 100%. Okay, I promise.
We try to spice it up.
So we were looking, of course, back at 2022, and we thought, what's the most impactful AI research paper?
Yeah, I feel like you could make the case that this Instruct GPT at the time maybe was not that influential, right? But in the upcoming, like in the last few months, it has become evident that this is one of the most important developments in the language model space.
Yeah, at that time it looked like a kind of small hack.
Yeah,
like let's improve it a little bit.
And it just now
smaller models also work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's super interesting. I feel like this makes really language models. It's almost misleading to call them language models nowadays because they're really not trained on static data, and they're trained in so much of this interaction and this more complex modeling of intention and alignment. So.
Yeah, but especially also the advancement from this paper to ChatGPT is probably mostly the data. Mm-hmm. Because if you really looked, for instance, the figure that OpenAI released for ChatGPT compared to the figure in that paper, they were identical up to basically the color and small changes. Okay. But what really made the impact was probably the data that they provided. So there is still a benefit to provide really good data and do data engineering compared to just grab all the data you can find on the internet.
And I guess this ties back to something we want to talk in a little bit, which is to what degree you think, do you think OpenAI has a very, there's a chance for OpenAI to have a monopoly because they have the best data in terms of training these models, right?
That's very true, but the question is also, so that paper came out in 2022, meaning that creating this data could not probably take longer than a year. So that,
but they have a lot of people interacting with their now.
Exactly.
Over Christmas dinner, we were creating quite a lot of data.
All of us have been working hard to give them data.
Absolutely. Maybe I mean there are of course many other impactful papers also in image generation and molecule generation, nuclear fusion control and all. But one that also ranks up there, and it's kind of the one that bites this one in the tail, is the chinchilla paper, of course, right?
Absolutely.
But we'll talk about it later. So, all right. So usually we start our show with some sort of breaking news, or the year has started off in a pretty good note. Recession was predicted, the end of investment in AI. So actually there's quite a lot of very large deals in the sort of venture and capital space. A lot of European news actually. So DeepL, that's kind of the European champion of high quality machine translation, got an investment this week of 100 million, so making it, I think, maybe the first German machine learning unicorn.
Probably, yeah.
Have you used it?
I've used it sometimes. Yeah, I see it that it's also more and more used in applications. which is quite nice actually to see also a competitor to Google Translate.
Yeah.
To not have like a monopoly there.
Maybe for Catalan.
Yeah, I used it. I actually looked it up for Catalan, but I couldn't find that language as an option. So I think that it was more limited the language selection.
So Inventa, a provider of AI-powered chatbots. I'm not sure that's going to go that well, but they got a 40 million investment. And Oxbotica, which makes these kind of autonomous delivery vehicles, got 140 million investment to scale its fleet out. It's not all rosy because Scale AI, which is kind of I think the largest data annotation infrastructure company. Actually, we discussed it last time. They saw some with Appen, also another data annotation company, large revenue decrease in the data annotation space. So they're cutting its workforce. Positive news from Biontech, which acquires InstaDeep. InstaDeep helped them, I think, develop the COVID vaccine, right? It was the AI company from London and Tunisia, which helped them develop the COVID vaccine. So they bought them for about £500 million in cash. So that's a pretty big deal. And last, there was this news about Anthropic's Claude improves on ChatGPT. But yeah, I don't know. Is that like hype? Has anybody tried it? Is it out there?
I tried to find how to get access, but it's apparently a closed demo for
Somebody saw it somewhere.
Yeah. There's some people tweeting that it's great,
I think the news behind the scenes here is that most of the 700 million funding of Anthropic actually comes from Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX fame. So they probably like have to hype up their chatbot a little bit before the money gets questions, let's say. All right. So more news. We now have a special section in our talk show. It's called OpenAI News. But let's just quickly run it through, Sergi.
Yeah, no, I guess the most there's been a lot of rumors about what Microsoft and OpenAI relationship will continue to be. Some people, there's some rumors that they're going to acquire part of the company. There's this 10 billion deal on the table. I don't know. I really don't have any information on how this is going to go. I do think it's very interesting to think of it from the perspective of like how Bing is going to revive their. Microsoft is going to revive their products like Bing or Microsoft or Office or whether there's going to be a big shakeup in the whole big tech space because of OpenAI being integrated into Microsoft products.
Who would have thought that Clippy would come back alive?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you think that Bing has any chance of a big comeback this year?
Well, I think it's also about what it can really offer you besides it. Like ChatGPT, I think is currently still used for a lot of different use cases than what you use Google for. Mm-hmm. Google is really also very efficiently built. So ChatGPT, I think, it is much more computationally heavy. So the question is really, when would you need it? And why should you not then directly go to a chatbot if ChatGPT would still be open? That's also a question.
Well, I think if you look at search, then the fundamental business model of search is advertising, right? And kind of high quality one-turn answers or chat is very unsuitable for advertising. So I think it's a threat to both Bing and Google in terms of advertising revenue, but Bing doesn't care. They don't have so much advertising revenue. Yeah. So they will just use it to bully the other guy, I think. And I was wondering, Rodrigo, are you on the waiting list for professional ChatGPT access? So, of course, ChatGPT is kind of a open research prototype, right? That we're all feeding with data. But people actually want to build it into applications, have an SLA, have an API. That's been kind of shut down from the screen scraping side. But now there's apparently an official API product. So you haven't tried it yet.
I'll be the waiting
You'll be the first one. Rodrigo has been working for the last decade to make NLP and information retrieval more expensive.
But I have one thing to say about ChatGPT. Like, I guess many researchers were working with DaVinci 002 and 003, no, 002 at the time, and it was super impressive. And then when ChatGPT came, I wasn't that impressed because we all knew that the capabilities of 002. But one weird outcome of this is that you had to insert a personality to the model so it could be easily used by humans. That was super impressive to be like, yeah, because people, when they try these prompts with 002, they usually ask questions like, now output to me, you, the neural network, something. And that's only a language model trying to predict the next token. But once you give a personality to it, like, it kind of understood much better our inquiry. So I see the ChatGPT is more like trying to simply align with our goals, but not so much an improvement in terms of understanding our intelligence to solve a task. But I'm not sure if you guys agree. You see a jump in performance, or?
I mean, I think it's a really good point that like so much of what ChatGPT has kind of showed is how far you can go with a better user experience, right? Or just like, it's so much more friendly to interact with that than just to go to the playground from OpenAI and interact with GPT-3. And I think that, that's a massive part of artificial intelligence as well.
Yeah, and there's this whole like dialogue memory and all that whole loop, right? That you can like reference.
But I'd be interested to like, I have a feeling that it's not so different from the just plain language modeling, as in it just keeps, a very long.
Yeah, I wonder how long. Some people have claimed that after like 4,000 tokens, it actually loses track of the.
Actually, I've noticed that when for instance I did translation with the many turns, eventually it forgot what it had to translate, and it had to kind of like redo the prompt.
Yeah,
so it
slightly
might indicate
senile chatbot.
So it might be a bit like that.
All right, so we already talked a little bit about Google. So there was a big piece in the New York Times that it's not just a few people on Twitter who are claiming that it's a threat to Google potentially, but that they really internally also see it that way. The question is, how will they react?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think this is great because like we've seen so many papers published by Google, right, on large language models like Palm and Flan, but they have never released anything of their large language models, and maybe this will be the push so that they start making like public-facing use of them, which I think is great for everyone.
Yeah, so there's this argument that it kills their advertising revenue, right? So why would they introduce a feature early to actively reduces the advertising revenue? But there's also the reputation argument, right? That they're just big corporate and they're careful. What do you think? Do they have to move?
I feel it would make sense, at least in the for instance, as a some service in Google Cloud products, because I feel like not that many people are using Google Cloud services, as in like their cloud business is struggling a bit. So maybe it would make sense to kind of revive that whole part of their, and like attract more people to build software with that. So probably not in their main search stuff, but maybe
not on the front page of Google.
Yeah, not on the front page, but on the.
Yeah, especially also considering how many queries per second come into Google. To process that by a ChatGPT would probably cost Google millions. And that to come back with advertisements, I'm not sure if they can really do it that well.
Raise the cost, lower the revenue.
Exactly. So they might not want to lose track of it. So I'm pretty sure that they will come back with something similar to ChatGPT, but might not be like in their main advertisements.
All right, so we also have some fantastic local news, and the star of this news is also with us in the room, Martin. I think it was announced...
January 10th?
Yeah, what was that? Wednesday, right? Tuesday. And the IKAI labs are just becoming a unicorn, I think, right? Do you have some additional information on that? Like what's going to happen now?
We'll start recruiting 85 PhD students now, and then another 85 in a couple of years. Yeah.
85 PhD students who are going to start
GPT 4, 5, 6.
right. they're going to start like this year, basically.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Around the country.
Yeah. So it's an incredible growth, like doubling of the current ICAI program, or?
Well, we're at about 250 PhD students, so.
Yeah.
Quite up there,
Yeah. So okay. So it's a super large degree. Well, congratulations. It's fantastic news for the local community. The question is, of course, where will we find that talent?
We have a big planet.
And I think this is also an important way to broaden the talent pool. So in other local news, we also want to plug for the Women in AI Gala, which is going to take place early February 9th in Boom, Chicago. And of course you should join. It's not only for women, it's for everybody. And we're actually giving away 2 tickets for the gala. They're €100 a piece, so come and grab them. All you have to do to to have a chance to win one of those tickets is send us an email at info@zetaalpha.com with the subject Women in AI Gala, and send us one interesting prediction for AI in this year. So. Okay, so just a very short commercial break. So those of you who don't know the Zeta Alpha platform, that's our product. So we are building this neural discovery platform where you can very easily find research papers and organize them and get super relevant personal recommendations. Who in the room is using it sometimes? About half, so the other half, please try it out. We have some very thematically fitting announcement, and that is that next week we'll be introducing GPT powered search, or not powered search, GPT enhanced search. So basically, one of the main issues that you have with GPT is that all the knowledge in its answers comes from its training data, and it's not always super factual. So when you're doing like professional search, we would like to change that. So basically, we have integrated in a way where the search engine results are fed into the prompt, and we ask it to generate the answers from the search results, which ensures a not perfect, but dramatically higher factuality for the answers. So here you see an example. For example, some papers about GPU hardware in papers, and then you can ask the question to the whole collection, but you can also ask it to each paper separately. So basically, you get like per paper the kind of on-the-fly extraction of metadata. We also put it in here in the visualization. So before we had these clusters, they were kind of green, blue, and red. What does it mean? So now we ask GPT to generate meaningful summaries and descriptions of those clusters, which makes the visualization much easier. And the third is when you're reading a paper and you don't understand something, you can ask it for explanation. So explain a term, explain a passage, simplify it, things like that. And here's a nice example. So we will actually use this, mention some of these papers later, but there's a bit of revolution in deep learning for weather forecasting. So we were interested in this domain, but then of course you're also interested, what's the accuracy of these models? So it gives that answer, very nicely formulated answer about the accuracy related to the existing state of the art. But of course, should you believe that? So in the prompt, we also have this kind of explanation where if you click on the info button, it actually tells you which piece of information comes from which paper, and you can kind of see the highlights in the papers. So that's of course, still quite experimental and in beta, but it will be releasing that next week. All right, so that was the commercial break.
Let's now talk about the predictions.
The main topic of this meeting, predictions. So we also use our platform a lot for those, like for analyzing the space. But Sergi has been busy for like the last month or so with analyzing what happened in 2022 and what's going to happen in 23. What's your general feeling of where we are?
I'm particularly very interested about the combination of language models and reinforcement learning, like both using language models in reinforcement learning as agents or like as some sort of priors for more efficient exploration, all that stuff. And also using reinforcement learning paradigms of learning in language models. I feel like we're going to see a lot of that stuff, and I'm very excited for that.
What's sort of your general take on the temperature of the moment and the main things that you are interested in?
Yeah, I mean, currently it feels like with scaling we might hit kind of a wall in the sense that we're running out of data actually to train on. As already shown, like the GPT models are training on data that you can't even do an epoch on. And at some point we're just probably running out of it. But probably with high quality data of ChatGPT alignment or reinforcement learning is probably where now more is starting and will probably give us even better models out of there.
Rodrigo, what about you?
I agree with you both, and I think GPT-4 will be quite boring in comparison to GPT-3 3.5, in the sense that we'll see some small improvements. Like you said, it might be the case that we're running out of high quality data. Also in terms of computation, I saw some fake news, I would say, that GPT-4 will have 100 trillion parameters. I think it will be more on the scale of 1 trillion maximum, if that's...
we have slides on that. Hold your horses.
Okay. So that's one prediction, because if it continues working on text, I don't think that much more that we can improve. Like, it will be some nice, decent improvements, but it won't be like these jaw-dropping results that we saw with ChatGPT or 002, 003. Yeah, and another prediction that I have, I saw more and more people claiming that they are using ChatGPT to help them write papers. It might be the case that by the end of this year, we'll see some paper accepted at a major conference that was mostly written by ChatGPT, not only written but the main idea was given by the model. The experimental setup was also given, and the only thing that the humans did was to actually go to the real world and execute experiments and gather the data.
Gary Marcus would think you're an optimist, but we'll discuss it in a bit. So let's dive into some of these predictions. We have. How are we doing with time?
I think past.
Good. So by the way, we'll mention a lot of papers, and there is on our blog. There's Sergi's excellent kind of review and blog post with all of these predictions and the underlying papers, so you can look it up through our website and the blog. And those people who are using our platform, there's actually a tag which contains all the papers. But right, so let's start with an easy one.
Yeah, NVIDIA, nothing changes with the hardware
prediction.
Much.
Nothing changes. So in when was it? November. We published this. Early December, we published this with the State of AI. This analysis where we kind of counted in all the research papers what hardware is used, and well, it's a bit tedious doing it by hand because we have a query for every one of those graphic cards and vendor names, and then count and then aggregate by year and everything. But it actually gives some very nice analytics insights. And I think this little chart here, that's logarithmic. So you can see the top dark blue line is NVIDIA. and that has a 21,000 mentions. And the next sort of competitor is actually somewhat surprising, FPGAs. But then if you look at TPUs, there's only a few hundred mentions. And they're all from Google, more or less. so I don't think there's really a competitor. We've, of course, seen that, they're also within the NVIDIA landscape, it's kind of moving. A100 and 3090 are coming up. Interestingly, the NVIDIA H100 was announced, but where is it? Has anybody seen it? So it's not really on the market yet, I think. It was announced for like third quarter of last year. And interestingly also, the U.S. government, in its kind of geopolitical play, forbids the use of the export of these advanced NVIDIA cards to China, among other places. And we thought, well, maybe that will lead to a huge pickup in Chinese publications of the competing Huawei 910 card. But actually, it was 15 at the end of the year in the papers that we monitor. So, yeah.
That's going to be super interesting to monitor in 2020, like in the upcoming years.
Yeah, that might really change now. But I heard today from Nathan Menaik from of State of AI that actually the Huawei card chip is actually manufactured in at TSMC. So it's also hit by the U.S. export rules.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty spicy. All right, easy predictions. Here you are, Rodrigo. Explain.
Yeah. And this is a more, how can I put it? It feels to me that we already reached the ceiling for academic data sets. Everything that we try to measure, there doesn't seem to be much room for improvement. And with 002, like with few shot models, we already get a quite good performance. There are some things, of course, that the model gets wrong, like double negation, things like that, or very long contexts. But I think GPT-4 might, or follow-up models from Google might fix these problems, but it won't be like this chain of thought reasoning that we saw with Palm in 002. It will be more like these small refinements. I cannot expect that much more with text alone. I think the impressive things will come with images and sound multimodal. But a text alone, it seems that if you can fit that input to the model, you already can have a quite decent answer out of it. Yeah.
So on that, I wanted to add, like, I feel that there's pretty much the dominant narrative that models have grown and keep growing. But if you think about it, GPT-3 was released on May 2020, and since then, like all of the top models, large language models, have actually not been substantially larger than that. Even like the only ones that were like there was some news of like 1 trillion or something, but it doesn't seem like it was optimized. And I feel like it's very interesting because that I think that the reason how I would explain that is just that those models were still so much under optimized, and there was so much to discover still within that parameter range that it didn't make sense to go to the next level, right? And I feel like that's still, like Rodrigo was saying, is still kind of gonna remain true-ish, as in I feel like there's still a lot of benefits or like advancements that can be made in the order of magnitude of like 200 billion parameters or something like that. And secondly, that also I think has been very influenced by the Chinchilla paper, like you mentioned, which basically says like a lot of these models have been under-optimized, so you're better off spending your compute on training for longer.
And I think there's simply the economic argument, right? So it has a lot to do with the previous slide. If we're going to be using NVIDIA cards in data centers, and currently let's assume that those 2 cents per OpenAPI call are a little bit profitable, but not hugely, then if you increase the number of parameters by 10 or 100, are you willing to pay €2 per GPT call? I'm not. But maybe let's do a quick poll in the room. So who thinks that there will be a GPT-4 release this year? 30%, 35, something like that. Who thinks it will be above 1 trillion parameters?
I think it would be 1 trillion.
Something like that.
I mean, literally.
That doesn't matter. Right? All right, let's stop talking about size. No, let's continue talking about size. This is kind of the same argument, right?
Yeah, no, I think we covered
we covered most of this. The exponential curve is there, but I think we are currently hitting kind of a hardware limit, and we will actually need some of these more experimental, low power, low cost hardware vendors to scale out massively before we can make that next jump.
Yeah, I just wanted to make the case that like this was from Huggingface when they published DeepL, I think like in early 2020 before GPT-3, and they kind of were making the case that models were growing exponentially. I do feel like the parameter count has certainly stopped to grow exponentially, but probably the compute budget of these models has not, but it's just kind of been allocated to other parts of the whole development of the models.
But your prediction is basically that we will scale a little bit beyond 1 trillion to just like have a nice round number,
I think for the PR value, it's probably useful, but.
But especially also the models like switch transformers, which had like multiple models or multiple like sets of parameters that you can route to. So essentially, your compute cost was still constant, but you could just scale the parameters as much as you wanted. There was also surprised that I didn't really see much coming out of there.
That's very interesting. I actually, Google had some works on this type of mixture of experts type of things, and I asked some of these people, and my sense was that there was not a really good way to do inference on this. Like at the end of the day, the kind of like the bill of electricity and everything ended up kind of being quite high when you run these mixture of experts because there was no good ways of optimizing these. Or it was too much of an engineering hassle, and then developing the dense models was still better. But it might be that they figure out better ways to run this.
I mean, there have been also already papers on how to engineer these models to work basically efficiently for training. So it is definitely a big engineering cost to really train these huge models then. So.
All right, so let's move to a completely different side of AI. That's my prediction. 23 will be the year of AI regulation. And why do I say that? Well, there's the European AI Act. There's been late last year the US AI Bill of Rights. And also other countries like Brazil and I think China has also launched some regulations which are actually not all that different. We wanted to have Katelijne from Ally here, the main expert in the building on the AI Act in the panel, but fortunately she's sick. So but essentially, it's likely that by the end of the year, the European Parliament will adopt the EU AI Act. It doesn't mean it's like immediately in force, but it does mean that all companies need to start preparing this year. It's not like with my previous company, Textual in recruitment. That's a high risk application. I'm really happy I don't have to manage that. But anything you guys want to add to this?
No, not really. I'm not really that familiar with this. So
how is it in Brazil, Rodrigo?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar. I know that we have a law that was passed 2 years ago that also obliged all the companies to have this data privacy regulation, but I'm not super familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in this case, again, Europe is kind of leading the global regulation space, so that's good. Let's move on.
I think this is a very controversial one that we were chatting about this earlier this week. You want to actually make this the case?
Sure. Well, so essentially last year it was also often the claim that we don't really need to have better model structures. What we need is really just scale.
Transformers, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there have been actually quite a few interesting papers which have showed basically different architectures really scale differently, meaning that you can over-optimize kind of your architecture to solve one small specific task. But as soon as you forwarded a lot of data, actually kind of vanilla transformer was the one that outperforms that. So this is why there were like papers like scaling laws versus model architectures that also then argue for, well, we rather need models that scale and not models that are optimized in the architecture. And I would at least argue that now this year that we're hitting also the bench with the data, that structure or model architectures become again more relevant. So I mean, of course, with my own research that I'm more in causality, that's something going beyond just correlation data, but actually trying to reason, trying to really build a model that can reason, can still get a big benefit out. And I would like to see at least in this year to really see their advances.
So I feel like these very much goes tied to like benchmarking and like what benchmarks are popular and all of that, because I do feel like as long as you're testing in domain, like growing your models will always yield better results, and you need to start kind of going in benchmarking that test other like out of domain benchmarking or robustness or shift or these type of things. Like, do you see any do you have any hope, or like what initiatives are you hopeful for in terms of like benchmarking or data sets that really captured that aspect of machine learning?
Yeah, I mean, with benchmarks, the problem is always as soon as there's a benchmark out, all you're trying is chase one number. And I would like to see a benchmark which is more difficult to just chase than a number. So we have seen a lot of cases like, okay, I don't know if it was like the original GPT that couldn't solve a certain task, but then GPT-4 was able to solve it again. So I think it's really also for, in terms of robustness and out of distribution, the question is also what do you define as out of distribution? For instance, with ChatGPT, I mean, it has so much data so that it doesn't even know what it doesn't know. Mm-hmm. So it will return to you basically the best answer that it has. Is this something that we want to, or rather want we a model that detects this is kind of what we might not be excellently sure on, and rather say, okay, this might be out of distribution. So I think it's also mostly this year like defining what is out of distribution.
And do you have any like out there ideas of like evaluating models or benchmarking, like things like adversarial type of evaluation? I mean, like with ChatGPT, how is ChatGPT evaluated? You just give it to everyone and they try to break it, kind of. I feel like that's actually like a really not very measurable but very robust way of evaluating things, like trying to break it. I don't know. Like, do you see a way in which like a lot of computer vision or things like that could move to these type of evaluations where nobody has seen the test set, or like just people trying to break each other's model, or like these competition-based submissions where things are very much,
Yeah, I mean, that's actually quite interesting to see if there's something possible. I mean, even you could also think about, well, if we have now like ChatGPT that we humans would have to evaluate, what about two language models evaluating each other? You can also basically add another meta level on that. Because again, we don't want to add actually humans in the evaluation. That's just expensive. So we want to stay quantitative. But at the same time, yeah, we need something that, well, hiding the test set is usually also not the solution, because as soon as it's leaked or somewhere forgot the password or something, then this again also breaks down.
What kind of structure do you see, like what kind of different architectures or structured models do you see emerging?
For me, it's a lot. For instance, reasoning is a big task that we want, like language models, also in general, like models to do. And currently, how we're doing reasoning is just throw a lot of parameters on it and hope that, well, it will figure something out. Of course, as humans, we had already a lot of reasoning ideas, like using just plain logic and similar. And I would like to see more of these ideas actually coming into an architecture.
Do you see these kind of things like reasoning with chain of thought, or like multiple agents, or so that you see that as part of the structure will become more relevant, like the architecture of the holistic system?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, sure, we currently have it like on the input level for ChatGPT, but I also would like to see if it's actually possible to put into a parameter space or directly in the model space.
Right. And Rodrigo, what's your verdict? Transformers or beyond?
So in that aspect, I like the idea of using models to evaluate other models. And I think we'll also start to see more models creating training data, pre-training data for the next generation of models. So maybe GPT-4 will use data curated by GPT-3 of some sort. And this will start some cycle that, because right as of now, the way we select our pre-training data is via very simple rules, regular expressions, so we can deal with this large collection. But in the future, we might want to use this model to curate the data for us. And as well as proposing new architectures, maybe like it seems that the less bias you put in your architecture, the better the model gets, as long as you use a ton of compute. But that doesn't prevent the model also suggesting architectures for us that contain some bias for this particular problem. As of now, we are doing this manually, but the model could help us in trying to find a new architecture. In fact, this is a topic of research for decades now, that is architecture research. But maybe now that we have control, we can talk to the models finally. Maybe we can guide them in developing these architectures for us in a more natural way.
All right, so let's move on to the next prediction. Thanks. So this is your
yeah, I kind of
topic.
hinted at this a little bit before, but there's already been a lot of work.
It's also more structure, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think it relates also to the like Legoification of machine learning, or like kind of like you building machine learning models with kind of building blocks that are like pre-trained models, or like these kind of things. And for instance, like we've seen some work that in robotics or reinforcement learning that leverages pre-trained language models as priors, or like for planning, or just kind of tries to use somehow leverage all of that knowledge to make reinforcement learning more efficient or better in general. And we've also seen a lot of the reinforcement learning ideas of kind of having some sort of reward loop to train models beyond the static data once you kind of run out, and to align them. And for instance, we saw with Minerva that they basically showed how you could train a language model to solve mathematical tasks. So with them, I think that they're probably gonna.
Is that a reinforcement learning approach?
No. That Minerva is not. It's completely on static data or on math. But if there's a prediction,
prompt engineering, more or less. Yeah.
But if there's a prediction for the next version of what Minerva is gonna be, that gonna have more robust reasoning, is gonna include some training in an environment where you have like some form of formal problem solver or something like that, in which the language model is constantly getting a reward signal from the formal environment on whether it's generating correct solutions or not. And that's going to generate the data and have like this virtuous cycle.
Language model gym.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much. And then you're going to have this virtuous cycle where language models become way better at reasoning about math and at doing formal reasoning. And I feel like that's going to be a big thing for this upcoming year.
Yeah, just simulate a couple million humans who are spending Christmas dinner typing queries, and that's it, right? That's more or less.
Yeah, so...
I think we're sticking too much to this topic. Let's not talk about this too much. But I think there is a certain chance that this kind of, the fact that we are being used as a language model gym is actually building kind of this very defensible data mode, as it's called, for OpenAI / Microsoft. And I think even if, like, I'm much more worried about this one than about, like, AGI going rogue or something like that, like the singularity. This is, like, for society, this is pretty serious, I think.
What are, like, can you think of some optimistic reasons to think that other competitors will achieve?
Optimistic? No, I'm actually quite pessimistic about this. So, are you optimistic?
No, not really.
So there, you have all these challenges, right? You have all these vendors of there's about a dozen different vendors of large language models, right? Even like I think Cohere and has released very good models. AI21 has very good models. There's a couple of European players like Aleph Alpha and Lydon. There's a lot of open source stuff, right? Like Bloom and OPT. But when you test it side by side, it's actually not as good as the OpenAI one. Okay, so what good reason do you have to use it then? Price? Well, is price like really a differentiating factor here? I don't know. So it's kind of winner takes all scenario a bit in my view. We have some optimists in the audience. Shout out.
So ChatGPT, for example, has been available for 6 weeks, right? You said. But the question is, are they already using that interaction data? So is the question really, they just did a better job in the first instance, or is the interaction data becoming a moat? That's my question. Because if they need a monopoly, then that needs to be the moat, not we just need to do a better job.
Well, we don't know, of course, here in this room. But what I do know is that they already did, I think since the initial release, 3 updates, which changed the behavior quite substantially. I don't know it was what is in those updates. Nobody knows. But what I do know for sure that it's kind of it's a bit like Google and Bing, right? The closest competitor just has a lot, like many orders of magnitude less clicks on their stuff. So how do you make up for that? If we believe that, let's say, the instruction tuning is what makes it fly. And I think the only party that can save us from this monopoly is to create a duopoly, and it's Google, because they have this stuff more or less ready. They just haven't released it. So I think we should write them small letters that will promise to use TPUs in our research if they make Palm and Lambda available to us. And I hope some of these open source initiatives really bloom or flower or petal or whatever. There is actually, for those not familiar with it, there is actually quite a number of very interesting open source reinforcement from learning from human feedback initiatives. Actually, 3 started very recently. We interviewed at NeurIPS the guys from Carper AI. What do you think of their chances?
I've not a good idea, honestly.
They're kind of affiliated with Eleuther. They've created some cool stuff in the past.
I still have not been impressed, I guess, by any of the open source language models so far. But
and then Lion Open Assistant, and there's also an open source version of Palm with reinforcement learning with human feedback, but that doesn't actually include the Palm model. So you get the code to train it, but you don't have the Palm model. So yeah, that's a bit useless. Rodrigo, what about your feelings about this?
So you guys mentioned that using reinforcement learning or data from users as the secret ingredient for ChatGPT or DaVinci, but if you look at the Palm paper, it was trained only to next token prediction. And if you compare on academic data sets, it has the same performance of DaVinci. So I'm not super convinced that the main difference of ChatGPT or these other models comes from reinforcement learning or supervised learning. There might be a thin layer, like unicorn and a cherry on top, due to reinforcement learning. But I think that the gross part of these, the large part of these performance comes from just unsupervised pre-training. And you can reach chain of thought, all these things with Palm, and by just train on next token prediction. So in terms of technology, it seems to me that you can indeed reach the same quality of OpenAI models as long as you have, of course, compute and data, but not this supervised data and reinforcement learning data. You can reach more or less that same level. But then it comes to the point, like you said, like there is Google and Bing. People already evaluated Google against Bing. I did that myself, and it seems like in a very methodic way. It seems that the quality of both is quite similar, but that doesn't explain why 95% of people still go to Google. So I guess the answer is more like a societal reason why there will be a monopoly, not so much a technology one.
If I remember correctly, at some point Bing was caught actually training on Google data, but that's a long time ago. All right, we have optimists in the room. That's reassuring for a new year. And actually, the bigger the advantage, also the bigger the incentive to create an alternative. So that's where See, we not have two optimists, we have three optimists in the room. All right, so let's move toward the end. Do you want to go into this? Well, there's a lot of companies that are firing people at the moment.
Yeah,
is that good or bad?
Phillip also made a very interesting point about this. I think it's also optimistic in the sense of academia and industry divide. So maybe you can make the case of...
Yeah, I mean, especially now as a PhD student, you're looking at it from the perspective that, academia, you have the freedom, and industry, well, now with a recession, you have a fear that this becomes less and less of a freedom. Of course, the industry still comes with the compute, so you are limited a bit in academia, what you can do as a research, but still you have more of a freedom currently, which, I mean, always depends.
Yeah, but I feel like we've lived through a few years where there's almost unreasonable freedom in industry. It feels like there's all these big tech companies doing research that I don't really understand how it makes sense that they would spend money on that. And I guess it just makes sense to just for the PR or to have like just smart people doing interesting stuff. But maybe with the whole recession or like with a bit of a less. With more of a recession market overall and stuff, like these companies would start kind of cutting on the less.
Did you have a job offer from Meta?
No, not from Meta, no.
No. Okay, glad. Well, for startups, it's great. It's easier to get good people. So we are hiring. All right. So synthetic data, we mentioned a little bit. So it's a little bit of a shameless self-promotion. But Rodrigo, go ahead.
What we did here, we take a collection of texts, so just a corpus from a data set, and then we ask an open source model, in this case InPars v2, to generate questions that this document might answer. Some of you might be familiar with this model called Doxuquery. So then we can generate tons of questions for documents, and we use these pairs as positive training pairs for our retrieval models. And we did this with all the data sets on the beer benchmark. And then if the model is fine-tuned on this data set on top of already existing models fine-tuned on MS Marco, we reach the state-of-the-art on the beer leaderboard by doing this synthetic data generation. It's still quite limited, the kind of questions that it can generate, because we're using a simple, smaller model like GPT-J. But I imagine like in the future, 1 year or 2 years from now, we can generate a ton of more interesting training data for these models. So I'm quite excited about this path.
So we'll just making the bold claim that synthetic training data will be the future of information retrieval. Who knows what will be the future of information retrieval, but it's a pretty good direction to go now and give state-of-the-art results on beer. So this one is from me. I think the main industry that will be disrupted by GPT is ourselves, AI R&D, for a couple of reasons, because we're confused about how we can publish papers. Actually, 2 major conferences have announced that. So did you use like Grammarly before, or?
I have, yeah.
So is that also forbidden, or I don't know? It's really confusing. So you cannot publish papers that have been touched by AI writing assistants. Spell checking, I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit more like refined than that.
Yeah, if you actually read the ICML policy,
yeah.
It just kind of says 4 8s and it's a little bit more refined. So you can use a spell checker.
Yeah.
And a Grammarly probably.
Make this one of the most frequent reviewer comments is the English of the author needs a little bit of proofreading by an experienced native speaker. Well, that would be very easy to attain now, but forbidden. Yeah, so Rodrigo, you already made your claim that we will have this year a paper accepted at a major conference that is made by an AI. I don't know if regulations will allow it, but you can try to sneak it in. Do you already have the draft?
It's just querying ChatGPT, yeah. But one thing that I want to add, that Jan LeCun said this on Facebook, I guess, saying that it's very naive to prevent people from using these tools to write, to help you write in the paper, simply because you're not evaluating the researcher quality, but more if we can make progress in science. So we prevent us from using these tools. In a way, we are preventing us from making faster progress. So I think it's a silly idea to.
So is your AI generated paper going to be submitted to SIG-IR? Is that what I hear? Not yet. Later in the year. All right. There's a couple of other things. Of course, reproducibility, right? When you're using a model which is completely closed source. But another one which I really want to raise is you have a lot of AI and data science teams working on search and retrieval in industry. Like we used to have a question answering model that we developed in-house at Zeta Alpha. Yeah. Was not so good. so
it's always hidden at the bottom right. You have to scroll to find it.
Yeah, there's this whole modern cottage industry of training proprietary models on in-house data, and it actually costs a lot of time and money. And I think these foundation models, in this case, the label is correct. They will upset that. They will change that behavior very quickly.
Mm-hmm. I think that goes back to the point you made before about the data labeling companies struggling. I do feel like there's a movement away from, no one wants to label data, right? So if you find a way to go around that.
Yeah, well, training models, that's what we do, right? We even have some AI thesis interns now, and they're like, I want to train models. Well, no, you have to do GPT-3. So it's a conflict. All right. How are we with time?
We're a bit over 5 already, so
all right,
I don't think we have time for everything.
let's keep some of these. This was a pretty spicy one, but Phillip will answer why he says that over drinks.
The slide that
there are drinks in the back, so this is for the pub quiz or the pub fight later. I think there's a whole building here filled with people who are going to use diffusion models to discover drugs for all our diseases, but. We also think that there's a very high chance that Huggingface will be acquired by Google. We didn't want to put it as a prediction because maybe somebody will code it, so we put it as a question, but who knows what a chatbot will answer. And we have tons of papers, but we don't have time to go into them anymore. So let's wrap. The papers are in the tag and in the blog. There's fascinating papers coming out already in the first week of January. I think this is kind of one that we should mention, Cramming.
Yeah, I think that it's this paper that tries to see how much you can. So it basically starts with the assumption we have one GPU for one day. How well can we train a language model on that?
And I think for especially for students and academic research, this is a good category of sports. It's like the Olympic Games, right?
Yeah.
No doping.
But I feel like not only for that, but now that language models as a service will grow even more and more, I feel like. This whole efficiency space of running things on smaller hardware will become much more important, because if you're running things at scale, reducing, doing things 30%.
You are not allowed to use PyTorch either then.
Well, you can get a translator to see in ChatGPT.
All right, few more fascinating ones. Of course, Wall-E, the voice-generating cousin of DALL-E, super good. Language models are drummers, and this is a very fascinating paper. I personally recommend reading this paper. It proves that language models with external memory are Turing machines, and kind of goes into the whole chain of thought and everything. Is a fascinating read. And to close it off, we want to make the predictions that in 2023, the weather will get worse due to climate change, but the predictions will get better. Actually, deep learning-based models have, in the end of last year, surpassed all sort of traditional meteorological models and are blowing everything away. So this is the vision of the future that I have. So we will have this global warming. We will have assemblies of reinforcement learning-based language model agents negotiating climate treaties for us. That's this paper here. And then the companies which are burning all the carbon will have large language models as corporate lobbyists. Brave new world. Welcome. And that's it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Phillip, for joining us in the panel. Thanks, Rodrigo, for joining us online. Our next edition is hopefully going to be again live from here, the day after the Women in AI Gala. So let's see what kind of how we feel about that then. And encourage you to go there. Thank you.